What's up, everybody? This is your boy D from DNC Digital, back with another episode of DNC Radio, and I'm very honored because I have a very special guest. I met this gentleman just a few weekends ago at RGV Fan Fest in Harlingen. Now, those interviews are still in the editing room, so some of that stuff will be coming up. Make sure you look out for that. I appreciate you guys listening. I'm appreciating the response from the last two episodes with Jolene Anderson and Reef Warfield, and I'm going to keep this stuff going, and the momentum is good. So I'd like to introduce the voice of the original Michelangelo, the Tick. He was in Mighty Ducks, Karate Kid, Teen Wolf. He was NBC's voice for many, many years, and he still does some voiceover work. Mr. Townsend Coleman, how are you, sir?
Hey, Buster, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks again for taking out the time to talk to me for a little bit.
Of course, yeah.
And how have you been? Everything good, sir?
I am good. Yeah, fat and greasy.
Oh, just like you should be. If you look up your name, it says you're originally from New York, but you grew up in Colorado and Cleveland. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I was born in Manhattan. My parents met while they were working at NBC in New York at 30 Rock. And my dad was he was the boss of the pages there. He was the manager of the tour division. My mom was the secretary, and when I was a year old, my dad moved us out of New York to Denver. Yeah, and so I lived in Denver till I was like 7, and then we moved to Cleveland, and that's basically where I grew up. Went to high school, got married, got into radio, and that's actually where I got going with the whole entertainment biz.
Right. You did radio for about 10 years from 1974 to 1984 in a Cleveland radio station.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just decided to just put together a voiceover demo just based on your experience in the radio?
Yeah, well, what it was I was the production director at a number of the radio stations I worked at, which meant that I had to voice basically the local commercials that we ran there at the radio station. The national spots that we ran were voiced by typically guys in New York or Hollywood. And we would get those tapes in and we'd stick them on cart. And, those are the big national spots. But the local spots were done by us guys at the radio station. And so because I was the production director, I, would get charged with having to voice most of those things. And that's really kind of where I cut my teeth on doing voiceovers. And I was approached by a couple of the ad agencies in Cleveland at the time to voice some local spots apart from the radio station, for which they gave me cold hard cash. And I thought, well, this is a great way to make a little dough on the side,
right,
aside from what I'm doing at the radio station. And so I started doing some freelance voice work.
And you were
really
even
put together
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. So that's what prompted me to put together a demo reel of my stuff and spread it around to a little broader audience and see if I could get even more work doing the freelance voiceover work. And after about 4 or 5 years of doing that, I was making more money a year in just Cleveland doing my freelance voiceover work than I was working 6 days a week at the radio station. And that kind of didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, well, this is a lot more efficient way to make a living. And so I sort of concentrated on that and eventually ended up quitting the radio station with the idea that I was just going to stay in Cleveland and do voiceover work. And then it was shortly after I quit radio in 1984 and in the summer of 84 that I got a phone call from our landlord. We had been renting this house for about 5 years. And I got a call from the landlord saying that he was selling the house and that we needed to be out by the end of September of 84. And I thought, well, doggone it. I got a wife and 3 kids and I hate moving and I can't see packing up the house to move across town, when I've always wanted to, either bust out and go to New York or LA to try and take a stab at the whole acting thing, which was my real love at the time. And so I decided to come out to L.A. And so that's when I headed out here. I came out here over Labor Day of 1984.
And, when everybody takes the big shot at the big spotlight,
Yeah, right.
No, yeah, it's definitely, and a lot of people can relate because they moved to New York, they moved to LA with the big dreams. Was it scary considering you had a family and you were just literally taking a shot in the dark? You went out there blind.
Well, sure it was, but I think always, the greater the risk, the greater the fear, but also the greater the potential reward. If you're willing to stick with it, because times got pretty lean. I mean, it was it was tough. There was some touch and go moments there when we first came to town, because admittedly I was pretty naive. And I knew that LA was going to be more expensive than Cleveland. I just didn't realize how much more expensive it was going to be. And so I didn't come out here with nearly enough cash. And I knew only one person, and she was a gal that I had done some theater with, some children's theater with back in Cleveland. And she was able to get me an interview with a couple of agents out here. I had some other friends who were in the process of moving out here at the time, too, but they weren't established. And so, just, getting these two interviews with these two commercial agents, shortly after I moved here was really key, because I ended up signing with one of them. And, within 6 months, they were sending me out on a lot of auditions, but within 6 months, I was actually able to start booking some work. Yeah. So things.
And when you think about milestones, when you start going towards an aspirational goal, you think about, your first big paycheck or your first TV spot, your first commercial spot. I'm interested to know, when you went out to LA, what would have been the event or the milestone that you said, okay, this is it, I'm good here? Or did you just do literally like touch and go, let's see what else we can do, let's see how bigger we can get?
Well, D, that's a great question, man. It was a little touch and go. 6 months, and admittedly 6 months is not a very long span of time. I mean, people come out here and spend 6 years just trying to get things off the ground. But I came out with a really great demo tape, because I had done so much voiceover work in Cleveland. And when I signed with my agent, I sort of made a point of really, I was going to say downplaying, but I mean not even mentioning at all that I had been on the radio in Cleveland, only because I didn't want to be perceived as just a disc jockey. You know what I mean? I didn't want, if I was going to start getting parts, because I came out here not to do voiceover. I came out here to be an on-camera actor was my dream, because I had done a lot of theater, a lot of musicals. I'd done radio. I'd done TV. I had done modeling. I had done everything I could think to do in the entertainment industry in Cleveland, and, there are all these, similar sorts of opportunities, I think, in markets all over the country, so I happen to, just try and sort of suck Cleveland dry, as it were, in trying to get my toes dipped into anything that had anything to do with the entertainment industry, in Cleveland. And so I came out here with a fairly well-rounded sense of kind of what was out there. And I also recognize the fact that, this business is very often about just image and how people perceive you. And I didn't want people to perceive me as a disc jockey. Nothing wrong with disc jockeys. Listen, I spent 10 years on the radio and, for the most part, loved it. But I also know that, coming out here, did get on the things was that I had vowed to myself that I would not take a job in radio, because I thought if I do that, if I could get a job in radio, and I took it, I'd end up staying in radio. And that's not what I came out here.
You'd be known as the radio guy after that.
Exactly. And that's not why I came out here. So I opted to, in fact, I told my wife at the time, I said, look, I will sell cars. I will wait tables. I will do virtually anything but get back on the radio for that reason, And so I think making that commitment in my head was a really good thing, because boy, that can be a real driver in terms of your goals and your impetus and the direction that you want to head and the things that you'll allow yourself to do and not allow yourself to do. So anyway, getting back to your question, where things really turned around for me, because I started getting like little radio spots and stuff in that first couple of months. But it was in March of 85. So I'd been here about 6 months, that within the span of 10 days, I got my first on-camera national network TV spot. It was for Kraft barbecue sauce. I got my first little part in a movie. It was, and when I say little, I mean little. It was tiny. I had like 2 lines, and I played the part of a waiter in this movie called Black Moon Rising. But the cool thing about it was that my scenes were with Tommy Lee Jones. And yeah, so that was cool. And then I got my first cartoon series, which was something I never in a million years even considered doing.
Now the theme song is in my head. You can go ahead and tell our listeners what cartoon that was.
Yeah, so I got a part on Inspector Gadget in March of '85, and they had been going for a year or two anyway, and this was right toward the end of the series, and they created this character named Corporal Cape Man. And I went in. My agent sent me out an audition for this. I thought, well, this is novel. I never thought about doing cartoons, but, this could be kind of fun. And I had done characters and stuff on the radio. So, and on stage, certainly. So I thought, well, how hard could this be? So I went in and auditioned for this character, and I booked the part. And like a couple days later, I found myself in a little studio in Burbank recording this episode of Inspector Gadget with Maurice LaMarche, Frank Welker, and Don Adams, and me. And I just looked around, and I just shook my head, and I thought, how in the world did this happen? 6 months ago, I was living in Cleveland, and my kids were watching Inspector Gadget, so that was very bizarre. So with that 10-day span in the middle of March of '85 was really significant for me, because I booked these 3 very different things, kind of boom, boom, boom. And that just, there's nothing to give you a shot in the arm than, booking stuff like that. I mean, that's why you move here. And,
exactly.
And it started to happen. And so that summer of '85, I ended up doing 10 episodes of Inspector Gadget. And, but that really opened my eyes to the whole animation thing. And I told my agents at the time, I said, please send me out on more of these kinds of auditions, because this stuff is fun. And so they did. They started getting me in. I got in over at Hanna-Barbera, had my general audition over there at the time. And they started sending me out on more stuff. And I started booking, little guest shots on, the Snorks and the Littles at the time, I remember, and doing, just like one episode of each of these shows that were popular at the time. But that's kind of got me into the, into that whole realm, that whole world of animation. I started meeting, other actors, who'd been doing this for a while, and I'd watch them and pick up tips, and so that really opened the door for my whole animation, what would become my animation career. Because again, like I said, it was something I just never considered doing, but boy, here I found myself in it and loving it, and just asked my agent to, send me out on more of that kind of stuff. And so that's when the doors really started to open for me. We're really in the spring and summer of '85. And it was a huge shot in the arm for me.
Considering you moved in '84 compared to other people who go, to be in show business, you kind of hit the ground running. Now you talk about the drive and ambition that you had, and that helped you continue with this dream that you had. You studied architecture in college.
Yeah, that's right. I went to school to be an architect, and that lasted about 2 minutes.
If you didn't get that call with the agents, if you didn't book those 3 jobs in those 10 days, would you have been sitting there designing somebody's house with the big what if in your head?
Well, hey, D, listen, understand, first of all, that when I went to study architecture, I was at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I did that only as a second choice.
Ah, okay.
That was the year that Disney started a school or helped fund a school out in Santa Clarita here called Cal Arts, California Institute of the Arts. And I had read about this new Disney school that offered, training in acting and singing and dancing and animation and all kinds of stuff. Virtually anything that had anything to do with the entertainment business, this school seemed to offer it. And for, a 17, 18-year-old kid in Cleveland, Ohio, who had, dreams of being an actor, this was, like the Holy Grail. And so I wrote away to the school for a brochure. They sent it to me and I got this thing and I just poured over it and I showed it to my mom. I said, Mom, this is where I want to go to school when I graduate. And she said, no way. I said, what do you mean? She said, there's no way. I am not paying for you to go to study to be an actor. If you're going to go to college and I'm going to pay for it, you're going to go study something you can get a job in. And I listen, I know that that's the same message that, 19 out of 20, 99 out of 100, folks who have acting aspirations get from their folks, when they first find out that that's what they want to do. But I was so bummed. She wouldn't allow me to go to Cal Arts. And so the only other thing that I had any interest in at all was, like graphic arts, and I loved drafting, and I loved architecture, and I have many architects in my family history. So I thought, well, architecture would be the only other thing that I'd even consider doing. So I applied to the program out in Boulder, which was where my dad had gone, and got into this program. And I thought, well, this is it. So I went out there to study architecture, but I'm telling you, it lasted, I officially quit even pursuing that major after my first semester. Okay. But I had decided against it way before that. I mean, I hadn't been at the school for probably a month before I said, this is not for me. And so finally at the end of that semester, I talked to my advisor and he said, look, I can see that this is not your dream. I said, it's not. And he said, you really love the theater, don't you? And I said, I do. And he said, well, then my advice to you is just to, no matter what your mom says, go for what your passion is. Go for what your dreams are. And I thought, I love this guy, and so I did. I changed to being a theater major there at school. I did a lot of theater. In fact, my first semester on campus, I auditioned for the main stage university production. It was a show called Life is a Dream. And I ended up getting the lead in this university production.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the spring of my freshman year. And which was at the time unheard of because in theater departments at universities, typically, freshmen never even get on stage. And
you're the understudy usually.
Yeah. And then not even that. You're the guy, building and painting sets and learning, stagecraft and stuff. You're the guy watching everybody else, from the sophomores on up doing the actual heavy lifting. And, and then by the time you get to be a junior, you're getting some smaller roles. And when you're a senior, those are the guys who are getting the leads. Production, a great show, and made some good friends. But there are also some people in the theater department at the time who were really pissed off at me because I was a freshman breaking the rules, and I had, gotten this part. So anyway, there I was, at the University of Colorado. I only ended up staying in school for a year and a half and then quitting in 74 and going home and getting married. But yeah, so the architecture thing took a real back seat to the whole entertainment thing that I wanted to do. And so, no, I never listen, if things didn't work out for me in Hollywood, it's not like I was going to fall back on an architecture degree because I didn't have one. If things didn't work out in Hollywood, I don't, honestly, D, I don't know what I would have done. But honestly, and I think was an important factor at the time, I didn't think like that.
Yeah, you were talking about that you just had the commitment to that dream, and you just you decided not to do anything else.
Yeah, and I never did consider, well, what if this doesn't work out? It was going to work out. I didn't know how, but I just knew it was gonna, because I'm here to stay, and I've got a wife and 3 kids that I have to support. So, and I really honestly thought, because I committed to my wife at the time that I really would, and things came very close. Listen, after that first 6 to 9 months in town, by the fall of, so after I did those 10 episodes of Inspector Gadget, all in the summer of '85, and I was starting to book some on-camera commercials and stuff like that, but and let me tell you, the money was starting to roll in, no, not huge sums, but I mean enough certainly to live off of, during that summer of '85. And I made what I'm sure is probably a super common mistake of thinking, hey, this is great. I've made it. It's always going to be like this, So, but by the fall and certainly by the holidays of '85, I was broke. I had to borrow money from my mom to pay my rent. Yeah, we had to sell our relatively new car. Things didn't work out quite the way I'd expected. And so like an idiot, I was making this money, but I was spending it just as quickly as I was making it, instead of setting it aside, for those times when it would slow down. And it slowed down much quicker and much sooner than I thought it would. And by the holidays of '85, I'd only been here a little over a year, and I'm broke, So then heading into '86, things really started to pick up for me, and I started booking a number of series, and I really got my head around the fact that, okay, so this money thing is something that I'm going to have to be really conscious of and really aware of, and not just go throwing everything away as soon as I make it. So, and then I'm happy to say that that's really when the on-camera commercials and the animation stuff really started to take off. And I started to book some gigs as if you will, the voice of. I became the voice of Home Depot, for instance, for like 8 years, and the voice of Jenny Craig and Mattel Hot Wheels and Sunny Delight. Some nice commercial accounts that were very regular and kept the bucks rolling in.
And how Frosted Flakes too, Colgate.
Listen, Raid. I was Keebler, Colgate. Yeah, I mean, it was a very busy commercial time for me, and it was the commercials and the animation and the on-camera commercials that are what really formed the basis of my career for like the next 4 or 5 years. Finally, around 1990 or so, I quit doing on-camera stuff because the voiceover thing was just eating me alive. I was so busy doing VO stuff, and I really lost my appetite for doing on-camera stuff. And the other thing is that the whole reason that I moved to LA to be an on-camera actor in like TV and film and stuff, I'd long since even given up pursuing that stuff. Because I really pursued it heavily for about 2 years, but I'll tell you, D, I was just beating my head against a wall trying to make it happen, and it just wasn't happening. So I just went with what worked, which was the voiceover stuff and the animation stuff and the on-camera commercial stuff. And finally,
now now that you started getting more into the voiceover work, I'm really curious because you were a stage actor. Now, when you're a stage actor, you get the immediate response or critique, lack of a better word, because you have the audience right there. I'm really curious, when you're doing your work on stage and you see somebody in the crowd reacting to your work, which is more kind of nerve-wracking, your voice director or somebody in the audience?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So nerve-wracking. Well, see, I don't look at it as nerve-wracking. It's really all about reward. You know what I mean? I mean, when you've got that live audience, that's reward right there. When you get the applause at the end of a show or at the end of a good joke or a hefty scene, that's immediate response, immediate reaction. And so as an actor, you sort of live for that. When you're in the studio, you don't get that. Or at least you don't get it in the same way. You do get it in terms of laughs, or you get it in terms of, you can read the producers on the other side of the glass, and you can read, the writers, if you're hitting their material right. And, it's a different kind of reward, but it's a reward nonetheless, because, when you don't have it or you're getting, negative reaction, that can be, obviously discouraging. But nerve-wracking, I don't think of either one of them as nerve-wracking. Anything that makes me just a little bit nervous, I think is a good thing, because that's what keeps you on your toes. And keeps you, kind of bouncing, through the gig. But yeah, I mean, does that answer your question? I may have completely missed what you were saying.
No, it's okay. I guess nerve-wracking might have not have been the word. It was just more like, whose reaction are you looking more toward? Like, which one are you, more satisfied with a certain reaction with, whether it's your voice director or your audience?
Yeah, well, let me tell you something that I think is important, because the reaction that I'm looking for more than anything is my own. Is how do I feel about what I just did? Because I feel like I've got a pretty good sense of what it is I'm shooting for. And I think that that's really important for an actor, to have a really, good vision of internally in your head of what it is you're trying to accomplish and what it is you're trying to get across, whether it's on stage or it's, it's like you got to go inside and decide for yourself, what's my goal here? What am I shooting for? What am I trying to get across to the audience? And did I do that? Did I excuse me. Did I get that across for myself? And if I feel pleased and satisfied about what I just did, then it almost doesn't, I was going to say, doesn't matter what the reaction of the audience is. That's not entirely true, of course, because if I went to one thing and I feel like I hit it and I nailed it, but then the audience isn't responding, then I got to figure out, okay, is it me or them? Or is it a combination of both?
It's obviously them. Yeah.
Yeah. And how, right. It's always them. And then I got to make adjustments. So that's, it's really about, what I'm looking for from myself. That's the reaction that I look for first. And do I feel satisfied with what I just did, with what I gave and how I did that?
Fast forward to 1987 and the whole world changes. 'Cause now, based off the success of the comic books, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started off as a 5-part miniseries, but then I believe in the fall of 87 started, becoming an actual series, long running. I think it ran for about, we're still talking about it today, but I think
it's huger. It's huger. It's bigger today than it ever was when we were doing it, and it was big when we were doing it, But this franchise is just,
it is so long, and people still talk about it. We talk about, how it crosses generations. People who have been fans back then have shown their kids who Michelangelo is and who the Ninja Turtles are. I'd like to know, when you signed up for the show, despite the fact that the comic books were successful, did you guys know what you were doing, or did you see this as just another job?
Yeah, I mean, none of us had any idea what it would eventually become. And the comic books, when we auditioned for this show, the comic books, I can't say that the comic books were that well known. They were still relatively new and certainly had their cult following. But I think that they were sort of in the process of really getting going too. And so when we, listen, I was doing a show called Fraggle Rock at the time. And the voice director on that show was,
Paulson too, right?
I'm sorry?
With Rob Paulson too?
Yeah, Robbie and I were doing Fraggle Rock, and our voice director, Stu Rosen, came in and said, "Hey, you guys, look at what I'm going to be directing next." And he pulls out a copy of a Ninja Turtle comic book out of his briefcase and shows us, and we all kind of looked at it and sort of rolled our eyes and said, "Yeah, well, good luck with that." Well, he brought us in to audition for it. Robbie and I ended up getting parts on it. And, I mean, what can I say? The rest, as they say, is pretty damn sweet.
Yeah. It's funny because, I mean, it's for me, it's still crazy that I'm sitting here talking to you, and I got to meet you that day, and you were very, very gracious and so cool. And for all the listeners out there, you're going to be able to tell in the interview on the video that, when I went up to you, I introduced myself, and you allowed me to interview you. Before the camera started rolling, I became a mess. And I was just like sweating, and I was like, I couldn't breathe. And then you're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, you have no idea who you are, though. To me, you are Michelangelo. You were the one that I would go for,
And it was wonderful. You were really sweet, and I felt for you because I know the nerves. I know what that feels like, and I know what that sweat feels like, and I know when you meet a hero or you meet somebody who's really impacted your life somehow. I know what that feels like. So
who's the most surprising person that you've met? That very famous person that has been like that for you when they met you.
You mean when I met them?
Well, yeah. When you meet somebody famous, who was the most surprising celebrity that you found out was a huge Ninja Turtles fan?
Oh, a celebrity who was a Ninja Turtles fan?
Yeah.
Oh, gee whiz. Gosh, D, it's like nobody's popping to mind right now as far as the well, I'll tell you. So here, this was a kind of a cool thing. So several years ago, when Nickelodeon was doing their 2012 series, and of Ninja Turtles, and of course Robbie was on that. He was Raphael on our original series, but he was Donatello on that series. And the creators of that 2012 series, Ciro Nieli and Brandon Auman and these guys, they were big Ninja Turtles fans when they were kids. So they had a real appreciation for the show and for the franchise and stuff. And they did a couple of crossover episodes where they brought in us original voices, and they had us meet the original Ninja Turtles met the new Ninja Turtles, okay, in this crossover episode where they went through this sort of trans-dimensional warp, and I think it was great fun to do. And then I got a chance to do not only those few crossover episodes, but then Nickelodeon also did this interesting series of Ninja Turtle just single episodes that they farmed out to a number of other creatives there at Nickelodeon, and kind of handed them and said, "Here, what would you do if you did a Ninja Turtle short? If you did a TMNT short, how would you do it?" And they each of the animators and writers got a chance to design that short however they wanted and cast it however they wanted. And I ended up doing this one Ninja Turtle short, and sorry to say I don't remember the name of it right now, but I remember Darren Criss was one of the Ninja Turtles on this short that we were doing. And he was this kid. I mean, you talk about a an award-winning actor. This guy's right up there with the top of him. But he was, it's like all of a sudden he was a kid again. He was 6 years old again, meeting the Ninja Turtles of his youth. And he was really gracious and he was really sweet to me. And I thought, wow, dude, it's like, you're a big time actor. I'm just a voice actor. I was just Michelangelo. But no, it really hit him, and it was so that was really sweet to see. That it's kind of the only one that's coming to mind right now. But
oh no, that's okay. Ninja Turtles went on to spawn 3-4 movies, and now it's its own. It's another incarnation on Nickelodeon, and what happens is that people ride the momentum. And I mean, there were Pez dispensers. I have keychains that I'm definitely going to send to you for an autograph. There was lunch boxes. There were T-shirts that I had you autograph that day. But so the thing is, something happens and it's successful, so they ride that and they try to use it somewhere else. You were also a part of Teen Wolf, Mighty Ducks, and Karate Kid, and I'm interested to know that. It was Ninja Turtles was a TV show, went into successful movies. These were successful movies that went into TV shows. Do you know why maybe these didn't hit as much as the Ninja Turtles did?
Well, listen, I'm not a sociologist, so I can't really tell, because I think that's kind of the area where it really hits is, what is it that speaks to kids at a particular point in their lives and at a particular point in the history of a country or a society at that particular time? I think the timing was everything. I think that Ninja Turtles also really spoke to kids a lot because there were 4 of them and they each had very distinctive personalities. I think it's one of the really brilliant things that the production company did in designing these, because they were very different than the original comic books. The comic books, of course, were all black and white to begin with. And then when they, did have colorful bandanas, they were all red. So they made some significant changes for the TV show and for the toys, specifically, by giving each of the turtles a very distinctive personality and a color. And I think, certainly as I meet Ninja Turtle fans now who were, 6 and 7 and 10 years old when we were doing the show, who are now, in their 40s, almost without fail, what I hear from them is, for one, they all had a favorite turtle for a reason. And usually it was because of their personality and how a kid might have been able to relate with that personality. Or it might have been because so many of the episodes that we did really had lessons to teach, and really had something to say to kids and give kids hope in some pretty dire situations. Now, we didn't know this when we were doing the show, but I have since found out, all these years later, going to Comic-Cons and hearing your stories, hearing stories from fans, and having fans tell me, if it weren't for Michelangelo or it weren't for Donatello teaching me it was okay to be smart, or, it was okay to laugh, and keep your spirits up, even when you're getting bullied, or especially when you're getting bullied, that you're okay, or whatever the message was that the kid got. Apparently, there were some pretty strong messages that were, being given to kids through the Ninja Turtles that were meaningful. And, when I think back on when I was doing Teen Wolf, for instance, it didn't have, it was more entertainment than anything else. And understand too, that when we were doing Ninja Turtles, we didn't realize that the stuff that, was really impacting kids during those years was the stuff that was impacting them. I think for the most part, we just felt like, well, it's just an entertaining show. This is just a fun show. So it just felt kind of, well, it's another job for us, and certainly not putting it down in any way. We all had a blast when we were doing it. And, it was fair, going 10 years. And we knew it was popular, certainly, because we kept getting. But, you got to remember, too, this is long before the internet. And,
Right. Yeah.
or the internet only sort of came online and became a thing to most of us, kind of halfway through our run. I remember when I was doing the Tick in 1993, it was when I first met Mickey Dolenz and who he for that first season played my sidekick, on that show. After we did our first episode and I was talking to him after the episode, I was pretty starstruck because I was a big Monkees fan and specifically a Mickey Dolenz fan. So it was pretty surreal for me to have him playing my sidekick. And he was such a cool guy. And we got to talking after that first episode and I asked him what he was doing and he's still doing music and stuff. But he said, but the real thing, and he leaned into me, he says, the web, man. And I said, the what? And he said, the web. And I said, the web? What's it? You said the internet, the internet. Well, this is August of 1993. I had never heard of the web. I had never heard of the internet. It wasn't a thing to me and I didn't have a computer and so that's what prompted him. So he tried to describe the internet to me. And so I went out and I got a computer and I got on AOL and of course then from that point on, then I, started to get it. But so what I'm saying is, so for the first half of the Ninja Turtles, there was no internet. And even when the internet became a thing, there was still it was nothing like we have today.
No, like blogs and, fan
clubs where people were talking about, there were chat rooms and stuff, but, it wasn't for a long time until the, Comic-Cons really sort of came around and, and people were able to find us on the internet and read about us on Wikipedia and stuff like that. That stuff just wasn't around back then. So so my whole point is we didn't have any conception of the impact that this show was having until we started meeting guys like you at Comic-Cons. And that's when the light went on. That's when I realized, holy cow, man.
Speaking as a fan, I'm going to put my host hat away for just a second. Speaking as a fan, you're not just a voiceover actor. You definitely, for this one guy, you definitely impacted my childhood. I loved Michelangelo, and the idea of pizza always made me think of Michelangelo, and I would run through the house screaming cowabunga. It's kind of funny because I find out that he was kind of when they told you who Michelangelo was when you were auditioning, that it was kind of based on Sean Penn's character from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I want to talk about your you have some other roles that I do want to touch on.
All right, well, dude, before you do though, I just have to say that you are like totally bodacious because for you to say that Mikey like impacted you and you love pizza, dude, I can't even tell you what that means to me. That's that you ran around the house shouting cowabunga. I'm like, dude, that is totally bodacious, righteous to the max. Cowabunga! Whoa.
Man, I owe you a huge Christmas present for that one. You did a very cool little movie called Fern Gully: The Last Rainforest. And you were excuse me, you were in there, and you get to do this movie. I want to talk about some of your co-stars. Robin Williams, who was huge in the voiceover world, in the comedy world, in the world itself. Talk about him.
No question.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me explain because we could probably make this real short. I had a very tiny role in that, and I didn't work with any of the other folks. I just went in and I did my stuff, what they call wild, where you're not recording with other actors, but you're just doing just your lines and then they cut them all together. So I didn't work with Robin Williams. I never met Robin Williams. I just, who else was in that?
I think Brad Garrett was in there.
Yeah, Brad. Well, I've met Brad. Brad and I have worked together. We did a show called, Where's Waldo, together. Yeah. I did the voice of Waldo and Brad was on that. But no, who was the Chris? Who was the? I'm drawing a blank here. Who was the lead in Ferngully?
I know that man, I know that Robin Williams was Batty, and I know you were Naughty.
Yeah.
Man, I'm looking it up.
I'm sorry, I am just drawn.
No, don't worry about it. I'm just thinking about like now, and you know the legacy that he left. You get to look back at your work, at your body of work, and say, you know what, my name is in the same movie as his, and you know, I'm a big fan of Robin Williams. Another guy I wanted to talk about was a very long old friend of yours, Rob Paulson. I'm wondering if there's like a unspoken of, you know, brotherhood or fraternity in the voiceover world, and how did everybody respond when Rob Paulson in 2016, I believe, was diagnosed with throat cancer?
Well, that was a huge blow for all of us who know Robbie and love him to pieces. You know, I remember we had some Comic-Cons planned, and we were doing, I think we were doing one of these crossover episodes I was referring to. And I remember him pulling me aside after the episode. We were done recording and we were walking out, and Robbie pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, listen, I just have to let you know that I'm not going to be going with you guys to," I think it was Indianapolis at the time. And here's why. And he told me, and I just felt like I had been, you know, blasted with a shotgun, in my chest. I was breathless. I was speechless. Just the thought that somebody I loved as dearly as I love Rob would be potentially struggling with that, and you know, who knew what the outcome was going to be at that point. I just had to shake my head, and it's like I couldn't get my head around it, you know, because we had been brothers. I mean, really, seriously. So Robbie and I've done probably more shows with Rob than any other voice actor. You know, starting way back in the beginning, and you know, in '85 and '86, and so that was a real blow to me, and so to think that, you know, here we got Rob and me and Cam and Barry, these four brothers who've been working together for so many years, and here we were working together again all these years later on yet another version of the Ninja Turtles was crazy good. And yet the thought that maybe Rob might not be a part of that down the road was just more than I could handle. It hit me really hard, as it did Cam and Barry, you know, when he told them.
I spoke to him that weekend, and I was just, you know, talking about, it's like a tragic irony that, you know, he was a voice actor and he put so many smiles on people's faces, mine included, and not just as a Ninja Turtle. I mean, he was in Animaniacs. He was Pinky in Pinky and the Brain.
And Pinky and the Brain, and yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I had a very long, very heartfelt conversation. I had to give the guy a hug. He's such a sweet man, and I'm so glad that he's still able to put smiles on people's faces, especially the book. If anybody out there is listening,
yeah, please.
Voice Lessons. Voice Lessons is the book by Rob Paulson. Make sure you pick it up. It's a good read, and it's something that it's a conversation I'll never forget with Rob Paulson.
Yeah, you know. Oh, I got a copy of his book, and I took it down when I met you in Harlingen. I took it with me that weekend and read it on the plane down, and finished it on the way back. And I was in tears sitting in the plane.
I mean, with
seat.
You more because you personally know the guy. You have this brotherhood that had lasted, you know, more than 20 years. 30 plus years. Yeah. Oh, I keep thinking we're in the 2000s. We're in nearly the 2020s. Jesus.
That's right. We're heading into the new roaring 20s, buddy.
Roaring 20s. We got to get some. We have to do the prohibition again and get those cool cars.
Right. Well, yeah,
it was time. Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say it was touching to me. Yes, because so many of the things that he wrote about in his book were things that I well remember, you know, happening back in those days. And you talk about the irony that here you've got, you know, just such a sweet guy and a prolific voice actor to get throat cancer. It's like, are you kidding me? It was, yeah. But happy to say Robbie is, he's back in full force, and and is going for it again with new Animaniacs and new Pinky and the Brains, and God bless.
Yeah, they got the Animaniacs on the road. They're doing, it's like a musical that they got with some of the original
it's called
actors.
Animaniacs Live. Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Coleman, I know you don't have a lot of time left, so we're going to do a lightning round. We're going to do a lightning round of questions.
All right, that's fine.
Cool. You have so many roles in Batman. You were Commissioner Gordon. You were in Dark Knight Returns. You were in Batman Beyond. But you also had a part in the Superman one. Are you more partial to Batman, or you're a Superman guy?
I'm going to go with Batman, only because I did more of those. But again, let me just stress, they were tiny little, what they call incidental parts. They weren't key roles. They weren't regular roles or anything like that. They were really roles that I want to just thank Andrea Romano for, because she's always been such a great champion of mine. And even if I didn't have a regular role in something, she would think of me and bring me in, to do incidental roles in shows like that. So that's where those came from. And it was really her kindness and largesse, that I was even on those things to begin with.
While you were doing Michelangelo, if you look at your credits, you were still doing commercial work. How important it is for somebody to know that it can just end tomorrow, and to make sure that you pick up, what may be perceived as the smaller stuff.
Well, I think it's super important, man. Listen, as an actor, you never know where your next job is going to come from. And so you always have to keep working, and it kind of doesn't matter what that work is. Certainly if it's in the entertainment field, you go for it. So I tried to spread when I came to town, I didn't feel like I had any particular one thing that was going to, that I had going for me, that it's like in voiceover work, I don't have this like incredible, many voice actors do, this real signature sound that you hear it and you go, oh, that's him, So I sort of knew early on that if I was going to get any traction in this business, it was going to be through versatility and kind of spreading myself around more than anything. And so, I went for commercials. I went for cartoons. I went for on-camera commercials. I tried to keep myself as busy as I could, doing as many different things in the acting realm as I could, and then further on in the voiceover realm. And to that end, I got really lucky in 1993 when, in fact, it was just a week after I auditioned for the Tick and did my first session for the Tick, that I got this fluke audition for doing a promo over at NBC. And so I went over to NBC, and it was August of 93, and they were starting this campaign called Must See TV. And so I did this promo for them, and they liked what I did, and they put it on the air that night. And it ended up being the first Must See TV promo. And they called me back the next week and had me do more, and then the next week and do more. And it just went on like that for several months. And after a couple of months, it looked as though I was sort of becoming a regular over there doing these must-see TV promos. And then over the Halloween weekend of 93, they gave me the Tonight Show promos. And so I found myself voicing the promos for Jay Leno every night. Well, that NBC gig ended up lasting for 16 years. And so all the primetime comedy promos, virtually, were voiced by me. And then, and all the Jay Leno promos and the, Saturday Night Live and, Late Night with Conan. All that stuff I did for 16 years.
And you still do, Kelly and
I do Live with Kelly and Ryan.
Live with Kelly and Ryan.
Yeah,
you said it in an interview. You just sit there in your PJs and you just shoot the promo, and then that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I am right now with you.
Awesome. When you talk about New York, I do want to ask how important, or what did it feel like, because it must have been a sweet moment that you got to do all that stuff for NBC, and your parents met at 30 Rock.
Well, I mean, talk about irony. Oh my gosh. And the thing is, what I didn't mention was that, yeah, my dad was the manager of the tour division there in New York for a number of years, but his goal was to be an announcer at the network. And at the time, NBC had this program where if you wanted to be an announcer, you had to study and go through this particular program that they ran. And so my dad applied to the program and didn't make it. And that's why he moved us out of New York. That's why he moved us to Denver, because he was frustrated. And when we got to Denver, he got himself a job on a little radio station in Denver, doing news. And that lasted for a couple of years, and then he got out of the business altogether. So years later now, when I'm essentially the comedy voice of NBC, when he would come to visit me, or even my mom would come to visit me, and I'd take them down to the network. They'd watch me work. I'd take them to the Tonight Show, and it was a big thrill for them. And I know that my dad was super proud and, just in full circle for him.
Right. That must have just been a cool moment for you to, take your parents in there and, hey, I work here now. You guys met here now.
Yeah, I'll say.
This is for all my voiceover buddies. Some people would like to know your first piece of voiceover equipment.
My first piece of voiceover equipment. Well, I mean, if you really want to get real technical about it, it was when I think I was 11, and I got for Christmas, I had asked for a little tape recorder. And so I got it was a little reel-to-reel tape recorder with little 3-inch reels and this silly little round microphone, that attached to it. And honestly, that was my first piece of voiceover equipment. And if you want to go back even before that, my dad, because he'd been at NBC in New York, he produced the Bob and Ray show for a summer in 1953. It was on NBC Radio, and NBC Radio at the time they were remodeling their studios, and they were throwing out these old tape decks. And my dad scored one and took it home. And I remember living in Denver when I was a little kid, maybe 4 or 5 years old. And my dad would record my sisters and I on this big honking, reel-to-reel machine. And, so my dad was super into that. And so when I asked for this little tape deck when I was like 10 or 11 years old, I got that for Christmas. And so that would have been my first piece of voiceover equipment. Now, if you're talking cool. Are you talking about professionally now?
Let's do professional.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I use a Sennheiser 416 microphone, and if I'm on the road, I now use a little thing called the MicPort Pro 2, which is a great mic pre by Centrance. And I've also used I was using the Shure X2U, but I go with the MicPort Pro 2 now because, it's got such a great mic pre in it. It's battery powered. It's rechargeable. And it has a limiter built in, which is, very cool for what I do. And at home here, I use a Gold Channel, a TC Electronic Gold Channel mic, a digital mic pre.
That all sounds very, very technical.
Basically, basically that's it.
You played Wayne Gretzky and Pro Stars. You were born in New York, but you grew up in Cleveland. Now, are you a Rangers fan or are you a Barons fan?
Barons. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was just curious about
that.
If
I had to pick between the two, I'd say Barons. But I'm probably more a Kings fan than anything else.
Oh, okay. Last year, you were.
Because don't forget, listen, I've been in LA for 35 years.
That's right. Okay.
That's way over half my life. I lived here longer than I lived anywhere else. So even though I kind of consider Cleveland home, I've been here in LA for so long that, most of my sports stuff leans toward LA.
Last year you were the keynote speaker at the Atlanta Voiceover Conference, and you probably had a bunch of people walking up to you telling you about, the Tick and Michaelangelo and all your other roles. Who was your source of inspiration when you started this, when you were just a young chap in the voiceover world?
Well, like I said, that meant so much to me, and and it was really working in radio. I got to tell you, that I'd listen to these national voices like, Ernie Anderson, who I used to watch as Goulardi on local TV in Cleveland. But Ernie was the voice of ABC, and the announcer on the Carol Burnett show. But, it was guys like Ernie and Danny Dark, who I replaced at NBC. These guys who had these classic voices, Chuck Riley and Ken Mars and Bob Ridgely and, all these guys that I really looked up to, that, when I was getting going and I got to work with some of them, it was like, holy cow, wow, I feel like I really have kind of sort of made it,
What do you want, Townsend Coleman's, legacy to be? I mean, does it still, surprise you that people come up to you with sometimes emotional stories about your roles and how it's helped them?
Of course. It doesn't surprise me as much as it used to, because because it happens so often, particularly at Comic-Cons now. But it never ever gets old.
Right.
I love hearing the stories because they're always different. Even if there are similarities, and there are, but they're always different, because it's your story, and your story isn't like the next guy's story. It's not the same as her story or his story, and so I always love hearing the stories, and it never gets old. And I'm always humbled by how fortunate I've been to be in this situation and to be able to meet guys like you and hear the stories and think that, wow, something I did all those years ago really had a positive impact on somebody's life. I mean, to the point where they're now playing it for their kids and bringing them to these Comic-Cons so they can meet us. I mean, that's just stunning to me. So as far as...
It was not only... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so you mentioned the word legacy. As far as a legacy goes, I mean, listen, probably the thing that's the most important to me is just one of decency and kindness. I just think it's so important in our world, especially as we seem to be getting self-absorbed and impatient and lacking grace and kindness and mercy. I just think that those qualities are more and more and more important in our world. And so if I can give somebody the time of day, especially somebody who was a fan, and let them know that I hear them and I see them and that I care about them, because I do, even though we might never see each other again. I want those moments that we do have together to have an impact, to have a positive impact. And I want to leave them with a sense that they've been heard and seen. So, I mean, I guess if I can say, I mean, that would be the legacy that I would leave, is that somebody after meeting me would say, now there was a really kind man.
Yeah. And I can't agree more. When I go and I ask for these interviews at the Comic-Cons, like the one I met you at, I don't have to be told yes, and even if I'm told no, I totally understand. It's just the way it is. But you were just so like, yeah, come on. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I think how excited you were to do it made me excited. And I think that's when I started to lose it. And
that's the thing. And that's what I love. That's what I want, because that's what I would want somebody to do with me. If I were in your shoes, that's how I would want to be treated. I mean, that's it, dude. Period.
And it was like, not only were you Michelangelo, you were the Tick. And I know we didn't touch on the Tick too much, but that was my first introduction to what can be known as silly as far as cartoons go, if that makes any sense. Because
indeed,
I mean, the guy goes to like a tryout and then they send him to the city and his sidekick is an accountant. Now, cartoons are silly by nature, but that was just one of those, like his sidekick is an accountant. You know, and it was just one of those hilarious things, and it reminded me of like the '80s comedies, the slapstick stuff, and you know the ridiculous, you know, airplane and Naked Gun type of thing. Um, Mr.
Evil is afoot. Evil is afoot. Does he spawn? You face the tick. Keen. Does he spawn? You face the tick. Keen. Boon.
Is that like a action figure you got there?
Yeah, this is my 16-inch talking tick action figure.
That's great. I'd love one of those things. Mr. Coleman, anybody listening, that you can find Mr. Coleman at Townsend Coleman on Facebook. And I think going along with what you said about, you know, people being self-absorbed and you know, you need to be nice and reach out. You don't really have any other social media that you're really active on, but
No,
your
you know,
Facebook.
listen, I'm an old guy. And while I'm not into. I don't do Instagram or Twitter, the tweeter. Yeah, you're an old dude. You know, and even on Facebook, I rarely post. You know, it's just, I don't get this compulsion to have to show everybody what you just had for dinner, or, you know, what every moment of your lives. That's just not me. You know, I'm a fairly private person, and I like personal interactions. But as far as putting my life out online for the whole world to see every moment of the day, that's not my thing.
I really, again, thank you for your time today and that day at FanFest. Did you enjoy your time here at Texas, by the way?
Oh, dude, we had a blast. Robbie and I were down there, and had just a great weekend. You know, I have to admit that when I was going down to Texas to that little town, Harlingen, way in the southernmost tip of Texas, I thought,
Yep.
who's gonna be here? I mean, this is such a tiny town. You know, do they even have a con there? Well, come to find out that, you know, fans are fans are fans, and it doesn't matter where they live, and it doesn't matter who they are. And the fans in Harlingen, you guys were as wonderful and lively and gracious and cool, as any fans I've met anywhere else. And, so it was a total treat. Do you live there? Is that where you're from?
I live about 20 minutes away.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm originally from New Jersey, but I moved out here, and yeah, I live 20 minutes away. And I hope you enjoyed your time. I hope you liked the food.
We had a great time.
The food is crazy out here. It's
Yeah, it
definitely
is.
different, that Texas barbecue stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. No fun.
again, I thank you so much, Mr. Townsend Coleman, Michelangelo, the Tick, Wayne Gretzky, Teen Wolf, Mighty Ducks, Must See TV. Still does voiceovers. You're just everywhere. So many.
Hey,
stuff
don't forget the 7-Up spot, dude.
Well, you were the spot. Oh man, I'm trying to laugh quietly so I don't ruin the soundbite there. Thank you guys so much for listening to DNC Radio. This is the episode 3 is in the books. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, and check out DNC Digital. You can follow me at DNC Digital on Twitter and on Instagram. This is D signing off one more time. You guys take care of yourselves and have a great day.
Turtle power!